Good afternoon and welcome to the Heritage Foundation and our Lewis Lehrman Auditorium. We, of course, welcome all those who join us on these occasions on our heritage.org website. Would remind everyone here in-house, if you'll be so kind to check your cell phones that they've been turned off, it's always appreciated. And of course, we will accept questions or comments at any time from our internet viewers, simply emailing us at speaker@heritage.org. And we will post the program within 24 hours on our Heritage homepage for everyone's future reference as well. Hosting our guest today is Rob Bluey. Rob is director of our Digital Media Office and director also of the Center for Media and Public Policy. A journalist and blogger, Mr. Bluey and his team promote heritage content and policy prescriptions on a dozen digital platforms. Through Heritage's Center for Media and Public Policy, he also focuses on promoting investigative journalism and government transparency. He's co-founded the Future of Journalism Summit and Breitbart Awards in 2012 with the Franklin Center for Government and Public Integrity. He is a member of the Broadcasting Board of Governors Commission on Innovation and serves on the Board of Visitors for the Institute of Political Journalism. Prior to joining us here at Heritage in 2007, he served as an assistant editor and then editor of humanevents.com and was a managing editor of the Human Events print edition. He also was a reporter for the Cybercast News Service. Please join me in welcoming my colleague, Rob Bluey. Rob?
Thank you, John. Thank you all for joining us today. There are a few conservatives who understand the American left better than David Horowitz, and that's because he was one of them. And not just any rank-and-file progressive, but a founder of the New Left in the 1960s and an editor of the magazine Ramparts. And as a result, David brings to us a unique perspective about the progressive left that is vital to understanding the political debates that are playing out in America today. If conservatives are going to achieve policy victories in the future, we certainly need to recognize the challenges that we face, and David will help us do that today. On top of that list, of course, is the American left. And David has chronicled in a number of books, the progressive left and American politics, including works like Destructive Generation, Radical Sun, Art of Political War, and Indoctrination U. These books and others have traced David's own ideological odyssey from the left to the right and have provided a blueprint for winning on the political battlefield. In 1988, he created the Center for the Study of Popular Culture, which was later renamed the David Horowitz Freedom Center. Its mission is to defend the principles of individual freedom, the rule of law, private property, and limited government, not unlike the Heritage Foundation. It also defends free societies in the war against their enemies and tries to reestablish the academic freedom in American schools. David's team oversees two very important projects, FrontPageMagazine.com and Discover the Networks, an encyclopedia of the political left and its networks. David is joining us to talk about his new book, The Black Book of the American Left. It is the first of his 12-volume collected writings. This book reflects on his years associated with the left and the radical figures that he collaborated with at the time. Please join me in welcoming David Horowitz.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back at Heritage, a great conservative institution. Ever since I came into the right and observed a political scene from a different vantage, it's always impressed me that whenever I see or usually see a conservative and a leftist or a progressive or a Democrat and a Republican squaring off, it's something like Godzilla versus Bambi. They call us racists, sexists, homophobes, imperialists, and we call them liberals. What are these people liberal about except hard drugs and sex and spending other people's money? And giving criminals the third and fourth and 15th chance. They're bigoted people, and that's because they're so self-righteous. They're unscrupulous, they're shameless, and the last thing they are is tolerant. My parents were card-carrying members of the American Communist Party, and therefore they were part of what was actually a vast conspiracy orchestrated from Moscow and dedicated to the overthrow of the whole American system and its replacement with a Soviet America. Of course, they called themselves progressives. That's the way they were. I never heard my parents refer to themselves as communists. Progressives. Liberals came much later, but it's back to progressives now. This book represents, it's the first of 10 volumes. It appears that I've written over 1.5 million words, and they all are about the same thing. They're all about the political left. When I came into the right, I saw that conservatives do many things really well. Conservatives understand the founding, they understand the economy. This institution in particular does policy well, but there are quite a few policy tanks. My center is not a think tank, it's a battle tank. What conservatives and Republicans don't do well is to fight the dedicated enemies of the system that has given us all the blessings that it has. And this book, and the books that will follow, I felt were worth putting together because they're about this left in a way that no other book is or will be. I mean, it took, you know, I dread to give, I shouldn't give my enemies, although they prefer to ignore us, ammunition, but it's monomaniacal in this sense. I write in the introduction, there was the famous, I guess it's just a fragment from Archilochus, the Greek philosopher, that there are hedgehogs and foxes, and the foxes know many things, and the hedgehogs know one thing. Well, I am a hedgehog. It's very important to understand the mentality of the left, because in politics, as you know, I mean, probably the principal cause of distress in human affairs is the fact that people lie. Everybody lies. Some people make little lies. Some people make very big lies. We have a compulsive, habitual, and the most brazen liar in our history in the White House today. But that definitely messes with your head when you're trying to think about who you're facing and what to do about it. So as I say, my parents called themselves progressives. When I was young, Stalin was alive. The slogan of the agenda of the American Communist Party was a Soviet America, and doing everything in their power to make America lose the Cold War and the Soviet Union and its system spread worldwide. That's what they were about. But the slogan of the Communist Party in those days was peace, jobs, and democracy. Heard that before? So I can tell you from I've been at politics. I marched in my first May Day parade when I was 9. That was 1948. So all those years, the communist left, the left that I was born to, has gravitated into the Democratic Party and is the Democratic Party today. Should be obvious, shouldn't it? Valerie Jarrett, David Horowitz, the two key presidential advisors who shaped Obama's whole political career, were born into the communist left. Like Obama, who was born into the communist left, trained in the communist left, graduated to the communist new left. There was no new left. That's what the 60s should have showed everybody. When I realized that's when I got out. I always thought, when I was in the left, when I described myself as a Marxist revolutionary, I mean, I was critical of the Viet Cong. I mean, by the way, I despised Billy Ayers when I was a Marxist revolutionary because he was a rich, snot-nosed, irresponsible twit and an ignoramus, which he remains today. But that didn't prevent me from working to undermine this country and to cause it to lose the Vietnam War. or to really to betray the Vietnamese is what we did. And I'm going to do this really quickly. People will say, oh, Horowitz is a relic, he's an extreme, I mean, using language like this. But this is the reality of the mentality. Take, for example, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and of course our whole perspective, even those on the right, is skewed by the fact that our culture is so dominated by leftists, you know, our press, the definers of our language. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is a left-wing ideologue extremist. That's what she is. There were 4 Republican votes against her confirmation, 4. She was waltzed into the chamber by Orrin Hatch, but got the endorsement of the Republican Party. Not too long ago, Ruth Bader Ginsburg gave an interview. It's when the Muslim Brotherhood was still ruling Egypt, or had just come into power. Now, what the Obama administration has done, which is to be a shill for the Brotherhood, would be tantamount to Franklin Roosevelt aiding Hitler's rise to power, sending him, whether they didn't have jets in those days, an air force, and $1 billion in aid. That's what the Obama administration has done. But not only is the left, and by that I mean the Washington Post, the New York Times, ABC, NBC, covering for him, but even conservatives are, they're tongue-tied in talking about this administration the way it needs to be talked about. And the reason is that conservatives mind their reputations, and they understand that if they do talk like that, they'll be pushed or portrayed as on the extreme and so forth. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was interviewed and about Egypt's going to get a constitution. Well, if the Muslim Brotherhood is running Egypt, what's the constitution? What's the motto of the Muslim Brotherhood? The Quran is my constitution. So it's all lies. And of course, Hillary, the idea that Hillary could be regarded as a prospect for president when she's done what she's done as Secretary of State is mind-boggling. We live in a surreal world, is what that means. So anyway, she said, in recommending a constitution to the people who already have one, which was written in the 7th century and hasn't evolved an inch since then, was, well, don't use the American Constitution, it's old. This is the way they think. It's old. It's just a piece of paper that was written 250 years ago, has had obviously no influence on the prosperity and freedoms that we enjoy, I guess. It's old. We need a living Constitution. They hate the Constitution. Why? Because Madison designed it to thwart the left. It's right there in Federalist 10. Redistribution is communism, and he said it was designed to thwart wicked projects like redistribution of income and taking away property. The American Constitution is old, she said. Try the South African Constitution. I was in South Africa when Mandela was released. I interviewed the left there. Their mentality, and that is the ANC, which is run by the South African Communist Party, which are the designers of the Constitution. Their mentality was Stalinist in the 30s. And as a leftist, I'm well aware of the gradations and the little revisions and so forth that go on through time. What is the South African? It's like the Stalin Constitution, this 1936 Soviet Constitution. It's all about your right to this and your right to that. You have a right to an environment free of violence. It's what Madison called, he called them parchment rights, but for people who don't get what parchment is, paper rights. They're meaningless. South Africa has 7 times the murder rate as the United States. It's the rape capital of the world. And typical of the left to conduct the international divestment of South Africa, topple what was actually the de Klerk regime it's the regime that freed Mandela and could have plotted a decent future for this country, But no, the American left decided to blow up the South African regime, put the communists in power, and then forgot about it, just the way they forgot about the Vietnamese when they were being slaughtered by the communists. I've compared in Gatsby, Scott Fitzgerald the way he describes the rich is they break things and leave other people to clean up their messes. That is a perfect description of progressivism. Okay, so the Constitution, it's all these phony rights. And then there's actually a phrase in the Constitution, I'm going to quote this, you won't believe that it's there, but it is, discrimination is unfair unless it is established that it's fair. Swear to God, that Orwellian phrase. And property rights, the Constitution protects property rights, which can only be, property can only be expropriated, they use the Marxist term, expropriated, if it can be shown that this will be a universal good. So it's a communist constitution. Now, it's not just that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, this left-wing extremist ideologue who's portrayed as some kind of a liberal moderate by us as well as by them. Not only that she endorses this communist constitution and prefers it to ours, this is the battle in the world today, people. Not only does she do that, but what do her so-called liberal colleagues do? Is there a dissent? Did the other communists on the Supreme Court, Kagan and Sotomayor, say anything? Oh, of course, Sotomayor they weren't there yet. But have they said anything? No. Breyer? No. Any Democrat? No. What does that tell you? I mean, you can call it the Popular Front. You know, I don't care. They're communists and they're fellow travelers and dupes. But the mentality of the Democratic Party today is a communist mentality. The left has learned, they learned from the 60s. In the 60s, we said, we actually were rebelling against our parents who pretended to be Jeffersonian Democrats. That's what they said when they were called, when they were in court, when they were called before hearings. They're Jeffersonian Democrats. No, they're not. They're Marxist communists. That's who they are. We in the 60s didn't want to pretend that. Remember, Jerry Rubin showed up at the HUAC committee hearing dressed as an American revolutionary. We're revolutionary. We want a revolution, and we want it now. That's what we said. And that was actually very decent of us because it warned people what we were about. And that's one big reason why the 60s failed in the 60s and has succeeded in the last decade in taking power in this country. That's what this is about. This is the triumph of the 60s, which is the triumph of the communist left in America. All right. I want to just say one other thing. You'll say, well, they're not communists because they're not putting people in the gulag or suppressing their free speech. Well, that's because they can't yet. I conducted a quixotic campaign on American campuses. I based my entire, it was for an academic bill of rights for students. I based the entire campaign on the 1915 AAUP, American Association of Universities Professors, famous classic statement on academic freedom. And all it said was that students should be presented when there's a controversial issue, which is the entire liberal arts division. That's all it's about, is controversial issues. There should be two sides presented, at least, fairly. And the students should be left to make up their own minds. And they should have required readings on both sides. That's all I said. I was pilloried from one end of the country to the other by the AAUP and by the AFT and by Democrats. And I had pitiful support from Republicans. The universities today, a conservative on a faculty is as rare as a unicorn. Well, there are some, but 2 or 3, 5, maybe. And they're all, of course, subject to punishments if they are vocal and active conservatives. So most of them are not. Is there a protest from the liberal House about the suppression, about the one-party system that's been imposed on our universities? Not to mention the student newspapers. No. So they are revealing their true agendas to the point that they think they're able to. And of course, the mentor of the entire left today, Saul Alinsky, that is the message of his book. Don't telegraph your agendas. The 60s made a big mistake. They didn't lie about what they wanted. We lied about a lot of other things, but we didn't lie about what we wanted. Don't make that mistake. That's Alinsky's book. You do what you can. So, you got Obamacare. You sell that, you say you want to cover the uninsured. The one thing it's not going to do is cover the uninsured. But everything else about it is a lie, too. They've lied about everything. Because the true agenda is to create a, they really want a single payer. We know that. Why do we enable them by calling it single payer? It's communism. Is it not? The state is your health care provider. The state. They can take it away. Somebody who provides it can take it away. What's freedom? What freedom do we have left if the state controls our health? That's what it's about. That's why they have risked everything. If there's a God that intervenes in history, they're going to go down big time in this next election. It will be a tsunami that will drown that party for a generation. But that's only if there's a God who intervenes in history. So, there are 4 features of the leftist mentality. You know, even Khrushchev was critical of Stalin at a certain point after Stalin was dead. You know, it doesn't take anything for a leftist to say, they'll say down with communism. We are democratic socialists. Yeah. The first characteristic, the first thing that divides, and this is the fundamental divide of our century and of the last century and of the modern age, really, is that people on the left are all Rousseauians. Rousseau famously or infamously said that man is born free but is everywhere in chains. Society did it. That's basically the message there. That people in a state of nature, they get along, they are not greedy, they don't lie, they're not vain, they're not driven by their ego. I mean, this is such a crock. I mean, how could anybody believe this? But everybody on the left basically does. Basically does. That's why they think government can solve problems. Government, the creator of slavery, segregation, wars, whatever. Why can government, how can people, you take the people who are lying and stealing and cheating and oppressing, and you give them lots of power, and they're gonna fix everything. No, they're not. They're gonna go on being who they were when they weren't in power. Only much, 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 much worse. And that's what we see, before us. Conservatives understand that the root cause of social problems is us. We're the problem. That's why it's never been solved. We are the problem. And therefore they devised, the brilliant founders devised a system to check us and make it really difficult to change things and really difficult to tyrannize over our fellows. That's what the system is about. That's why the rights are all negative. They're things that government can't do to you, because your basic rights are not given by government, but they're given by your creator. Now, if you believe that social institutions are the source of the problems, and that if you change social institutions, you can change people, Even Hillary Clinton said we have to redefine what it means to be human in the 21st century. That is communism, people. That pure and simple. That is what drives them. That's the core belief. If we get enough power and change social institutions, we can create new men and new women, and they're all going to get along, and everything is going to be just peachy. That is the mentality of the Democratic Party today, and there are no dissenters in that party. None. Zippo. That's who we're facing. The second thing to know about the left, and they like the term progressive, because they believe that history is a forward march. Things are getting better and better. Now there are setbacks, but it's moving forward. Barack Obama placed a carpet in the Oval Office, which has an inscription. The moral arc of the universe is bent towards justice. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Is there a worse century in human history than the 20th century from the point of view of the slaughter of human beings, the genocides, the slave labor camps, and the oppressions? And the 21st century, if we don't stop these people, is going to be a lot worse. It's the first thing I said when Obama got elected the second time. A lot of people are going to die because of this election. And unfortunately, it's proving to be true, and will be, if they had conducted that deal with the Iranians, truer still. So progressives believe that there's a happy future. And in fact, and their minds are focused that way. It's a complete contrast to conservatives. Conservatives are what used to be normal in this country. The founders were conservatives. The idea is their view of history was such that they're focused, conservatives generally, of course, are focused on the past. That is, on learning from the past. This is what human beings have been like for 3,000 years. Democracies have been tried, monarchies have been tried, aristocracies have been tried, and these are the problems. And they didn't think that democracy was a big solution. They thought, like Churchill, it's the worst system except for all the rest. And they were very conscious of the flaws of preceding democracies, which is why they instituted the checks and balances. So conservatives are pragmatists, and that's why they're so hungry for deals. My message to Republicans, don't make any deals that help the Democrats and Obama for the next year, please. You can make deals when you are in the driver's seat. Don't make deals from weakness. Progressives are focused on the future. And what's the chief characteristic of the future? It's imaginary. It's never the future they are focused on never existed in human history. And as conservatives, we understand it can never exist. It's an impossible dream and a very, very destructive one, as we know from the history of progressive movements in the 20th century, which killed 100 million people in peacetime. Hitler killed them in wars. He killed plenty in peace, but he didn't kill 100 million people. It took a progressive to do that. It is as I've said in many places, a crypto religion. The world is a fallen place. And we're going to save it. This is what makes them so dangerous. They see themselves as a savior. A decent, I would say authentic, but an authentic religion says the world is a really screwed up place. And human beings are incapable of unscrewing it. But when we die, you have a faith. You can't know, you have a faith. My friend Christopher Hitchens could not know there was no God. That's just his religious faith. But a true religionist has the faith that it'll all be sorted out on the other side when we see face to face. That's the only kind of redemption or belief in redemption that I can respect. People who believe the redemption will take place in this life and they're going to be part of it, that's the Hitlers, that's the Lenins, that's the Maos. And unfortunately, it is the ideology, moderated, of course, but the ideology, I mean, moderated for the American framework of the Democratic Party and the progressive left. If we have the power, we can do it. So if you believe that, as I said, that social institutions can change things by getting enough power, then when you look at your opponents, who are the people who are not going along with the program? You see yourself as the army of the saints. Who are they? They're the party of Satan. You are the party of Satan. If you want to understand a so-called liberal, just think of a hellfire and damnation preacher and his mentality. That's what it is. That's why they're rude. They're always interrupting. That's why it doesn't bother them in the least that there are no conservatives on their faculties, because conservatives are evil. They're spreading ideas that are evil, that are keeping people from enjoying this paradise on earth that they're going to bring about. Third characteristic is their alienation from this country, and that leads to their, what I generously call uncertain loyalties. We're the problem. America's the problem. What weakens America is actually good. You can't understand Obama's policies without understanding that. But we're complicit. Obama paid no attention, really, to the, well, conservatives will understand this phrase, but Romney should not have used it in a presidential debate before 70 million people. He didn't care about the status of forces agreement. That is, we spent $1 trillion, we lost thousands of lives to keep Iraq out of the Islamo-fascist hands, and Obama just kissed it all goodbye. We don't have a troop there, we don't have a base there, and anybody hear the apologies from all the Democrats and leftists who said it was about blood for oil? What oil did we get? The Chinese got the oil. America is a patsy. That's basically, but Obama betrayed every American that gave their life for the people of Iraq, every one of them. And not a single Republican said anything or accused him of that betrayal. And it's not, look, it's not just Republicans. I mean, I know there's a lot of people probably here who think of themselves as conservatives rather than Republicans. Well, what did conservatives do? Where's the conservative screed on that? There is none. There is none. I mean, waking up a little bit over Benghazi. It's the most shameful act in the history of the American presidency. It's so un-American. It's beyond politics. Americans don't leave their dead on the battlefield. They certainly don't abandon American heroes. These were Navy SEALs who served Obama. You don't hang up the phone and forget about them when they're fighting for their lives for the next 7 hours. But he did. He did, and so did Hillary. And the fourth, all right, the fourth characteristic, of course, is that they lie. And it's not like politicians spinning. It's not a lie to cover up that you were having sex with an intern in the White House. That's not the lies I'm talking about. You cannot be a leftist without lying, and lying about the most basic strategic facts of who you are. Leftists may be well, they are delusional because they believe in this social justice at the end of the rainbow, the kingdom of heaven on earth that they're going to bring about. I mean, how arrogant is that? But they're delusional, but they're not stupid, which is why my parents called themselves progressives. And my mother, of course, was a registered Democrat. Why do you call yourself progressive? It's the same reason that, now, I don't want to upset anybody who is a true believing libertarian, but a lot of people say I'm a libertarian rather than a Republican, particularly in Hollywood. It's safer. You cannot telegraph your agendas. If you know, I'm sitting there with a, of course I'm like Tiresias, I guess, who was, you know, he spent 7 years as a woman, so everybody was always coming to him for advice. I see Nancy Pelosi, when Obamacare was passed, beaming and saying, you know, first we did was, I guess it was first was Social Security. And my conservative mind says, bankrupt. And she goes, and then Medicare, bankrupt. And now we're going to triple or quadruple down. I mean, you never know that. All those figures they put out in the beginning are lies. It's probably 10 times what they say it's going to cost. How can you be so delusional? Because in her mind, these are just building blocks of the socialist America. That's what it's about. That's the agenda of Obamacare. I never thought I would live to see the day when I would say that we are on the, I don't want to make this overly dramatic, but we're within reach of a totalitarian state in this country. If you are prepared to use the IRS to punish your political opponents, and trust me, I mean, when the Clintons were in power, they were doing it too, but not only is Obama behind that, but he's promoted everybody that's involved in it. If you are willing to use the IRS to punish your opponents, if you have a healthcare system which controls, that's what it's about, the services that you provide to people to save their lives and the lives of their loved ones, and you have a spy agency that knows everything that's going on, you don't need a secret police to destroy any opponent. It's right there at his fingertips. And obviously, he doesn't care, or he does care. He's protecting it. Who has he fired? How do you understand this mentality except that this is a communist in the White House? Somebody who was brought up by communists, trained by communists. Stanley Kurtz has written an absolutely definitive book on Obama's history as a radical and his training and his mentality. You can't understand it any other way, and the people around him. But what's truly frightening is that the Democratic Party is on board for this, and I understand there's all kinds of self-interest for people running for office and so forth. And then you have the Soros, who has put together a coalition of the true communist left, like the new mayor of New York, elected by the Workers' Families Party, which is a Hillary supporter. Richard Poe and I wrote a book called The Shadow Party, which has all this, you know, in there. It was written years ago. Soros has put together a powerful political and coalition financially that goes from the Occupy Wall Street left, these Occupy Wall Street lunatics are creatures of the Obama administration, the Center for American Progress, the SEIU, the communist unions. We're in trouble as a country. These are very, very dark days for this country. Now, I'm going to conclude here, but not to depress you all. There's been an earthquake on the conservative right since I came into it. The first thing that looking with the eyes of a leftist, recent leftist, at the conservative side, I said, where's the army? Where's the ground war? Where's the SDS? Where's the MoveOn.org? Where are the unions? All these forces for communism on the left that have pushed the Democratic Party from the McGovern days. It started with McGovern. It took 40 years, but have taken over that party. And there was none. And it's not like 5 years ago where you couldn't find 3 conservatives agreeing to march on Washington because they look at each other and say, what are we, collectivists? That's what they would say. And now there have been 100,000. The Tea Party is the earthquake. you would not have a Cruz standing up and saying, no, we are not signing on to this without the Tea Party. And the best thing that all Republicans can do is just stop the fratricide right now. Let the primary voters decide. You have any belief in this system as a democracy, you have to believe in the grassroots that it's going to make mistakes. Everybody in politics makes mistakes. I do think, personally, that candidates should be vetted just so that we don't get loons like Christine O'Donnell being supported by the party. But to me, there should be a committee of two to vet candidates. And candidates would have to get all the money that Republican candidates get once they're elected in a primary, unless the two of them, both of them, unanimously say no. And those two, I picked symbolic figures, would be Ted Cruz and Karl Rove. That's the way forward. And the final thing I have to say is we cannot beat the left. Remember Whittaker Chambers in the preface to Witness said, I am leaving the winning side for the losing side. Why are we going to lose? He said, because communists have an idea they're willing to die for, and we don't. We do have that idea, and that idea is freedom. Everything that Obama and the left is doing is a threat to individual freedom. Do not talk about Obamacare and the debt as though they're accounting problems. What they are daggers aimed at the youth of this country. It's a war on the young. Because of Obamacare is taxing young and healthy people. That's what it's about. Heavy taxes on them to fund people who are at the end of their lives and, who have abused themselves. Maybe they've just been unfortunate. We can find a way to help them. But we don't have to do it by punishing the young, by having them graduate from college with $100,000 debts, with running up trillions of dollars in deficits that they're going to have to pay. What does that mean? It means another day of indentured servitude. Taxes are a form of indentured servitude. You work for the government instead of yourself. And what Obama has done and what the Democratic Party is dedicated to doing is increasing the days when you are a servant of the state and not free. And that has to be the Republican rallying cry. Thank you.